Heute habe ich einen ganz besonderen Gast hier für euch. Einen Gast aus den USA, aus dem Silicon Valley, aus der Kernschmelze von künstlicher Intelligenz. Er heißt Zack Kass und ist der ehemalige Leiter der Go-to-Market-Strategie von OpenAI. Ihr wisst, OpenAI, das sind die ChatGPT rausgebracht haben im November 2022. Und am ersten Tag erreichte ChatGPT 1 Million Nutzer. Und dann innerhalb von 2 Monaten 100 Millionen Nutzer. Kein anderes Produkt hat das vorher geschafft. Also Zack hält den Weltrekord für die erfolgreichste Go-to-Market-Strategie aller Zeiten. Und heute ist er bei uns. Und heute enthüllt er die Strategien, mit denen künstliche Intelligenz den Markt erobert. Er sagt auch, wie es weitergeht. Und er zeigt, wie man am ersten Tag einer Kampagne Millionen von Kunden erreicht. Für jeden von euch, der Produkte hat, der irgendwas verkaufen will, ist das die Anleitung, die Blaupause zum Erfolg. Hier ist Zack Kass.
Now we switch. Can you give me the picture if Zack is already here? Can you show me that Zack is already here? This would be helpful for me. Otherwise, I'm talking into a kind of a black hole. Oh, this is Zack. Perfect. So hey, nice to see you, Zack. I do a short introduction and then I hand it over to you. Zack Kass, the previous head of go-to-market strategy at OpenAI. You all know OpenAI reached, or ChatGPT, the product, reached within one day, I think, over 1 million people, million customers, and 100 million in 2 or 3 months. So this is the fastest growing product ever. So we could call Zack the world record holder for go-to-market strategies, and we invited him, and he joins us to explain what this world record breaking go-to-market strategy looked like, how maybe we can repeat it, and basically what his prediction is on the future of AI for the next 10 years down the road. So, Zack, you can't be here in Germany, which is a pity, but nevertheless, I'm very grateful you are joining us by Zoom. So, where are you joining from?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm joining you from my home I live in Santa Barbara, California.
Perfect. I saved my questions for the fireside chat, which will be a virtual fireside chat, of course, after your presentation. So the floor is yours. I hand it over to you, and after this we will have a questions from the audience and questions from my side. But now it's your turn.
Terrific. Well, thanks again for having me. I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but yeah, I'm very honored to be here. I'm going to talk today for the next 20 or 30 minutes about something that I think everyone should be paying a lot more attention to right now, and something that I have not been able to look away from in the last probably 18 months, which is a term I'll call societal thresholds. And before I talk about societal thresholds, what I'll sort of talk about is my journey in AI and sort of my understanding of what the science is trying to accomplish, because for most of AI's history, certainly statistical machine learning modeling, we were able to build these fairly rudimentary, slow and pretty expensive machines that could do very specific things. And we could visually represent these things quite easily. I could put something on a screen and say, this is what AI is capable of today, and that broke. It started breaking a while ago, but it pronounced in June 2024 when the model GPT-4o won the Math Olympiad. And when it did so, it started accomplishing things that most people just cannot make sense of. So I simply say to people now, we're building machines that possess human intellectual equivalence and superiority. This is the best way I know how to explain AI to people. And I try not to use terms like agentic and generative and physical AI, because I think it actually distracts from sort of what we're building towards. And we're getting very good at this. It's sort of a remarkable rate. We broke Moore's law in, I think, 2021 or 2022, which said that machines would get twice as fast and half as expensive every 4 years. Well, now they're getting almost half as expensive and twice as capable every 7 months. Now, what's particularly impressive about this is no one inside the industry really could have predicted this. The rate at which these machines are improving in capability is astounding. But the most important trend, and the one that I think is sort of deserving of the most credit when you consider, as you pointed out, the growth of ChatGPT, it's this one. Because as machine intelligence is getting exceptionally good, it's also declining in price and cost precipitously. And this is counter-narrative to a certain extent. Most people, if you ask them, is AI getting more or less expensive, they'd say it's getting more expensive. And then that's true on a training basis, but that's not true on an inference basis. That's not true in terms of how we run the machines. And the cost to actually run an AI model now has declined in cost so precipitously that it looks like it's falling off the graph, basically. And for context, right, you can see on this graph, when we launched GPT-4, it was $60 per million tokens, and today it's a little less than $1.40. And this is one of the reasons that ChatGPT was so popular so quickly, which is that it wasn't just easy for people to use in this form that they were comfortable with, the app. And it's not just that it was good, it's that it was very cheap, and for most people for a long time, it was free. That's incredible. And this matters to me for a lot of reasons, but namely, as a human, anytime we've observed a critical resource decline in cost this much, let alone this quickly, we've observed a Cambrian economic explosion. Very good things happen when important resources get inexpensive. And we saw this with water, and then foodstuffs, and then electricity, and now the internet. And in those cases, it took thousands of years or hundreds of years or at least dozens of years. In AI's case, it's taking a few years. And that just spells an incredible future where the cost of goods and services should continue to decline because the critical resources that are powering them are getting inexpensive. And the other reason I care about this quite a bit is that it suggests that the research itself will in fact probably utilitize, it will commoditize, that the differentiation in the world will not be access to the best model, it will be adoption of the best model. And I think we're going to measure economies in the future on AI adoption much more so than AI creation. Now, given all this, given that the models are getting exceptionally good and declining in cost at an exceptional rate, I have a core thesis that I will share with everyone that I think must be sort of appreciated and stared at quite intensely, which is that I think the world will soon have access to unmetered intelligence. And unmetered intelligence is a term that Boris Power, the head of research engineering, and I coined at OpenAI in 2021. And we did so because we had this problem. We were traveling around the world showing everyone we're showing everyone GPT-3. And no one really cared, especially the CEOs, shockingly. It was, we thought, incredible. And even when we had achieved GPT 3.5, it was still, as far as people were concerned, too slow, not good enough, and too expensive. Now, obviously, ChatGPT changed that because it put everything into a very simple app. But before we had that app that we could just easily show someone, instead, what we tried to explain to people is what would happen if the machines kept getting better and kept getting less expensive. And the easiest way we knew to do that was to explain a world where intelligence didn't differentiate us. What would happen in a world where the machines became so plentiful, so inexpensive, and so smart that our intelligence paled in comparison? And we called it unmetered intelligence. It's not free, nothing is free, but it is unmetered in the sense that everyone in this room uses as much internet every day as you want without regard for the cost. because it is, in fact, as close to free as possible. It is a commodity in the truest sense, access to all of the world's information. That then has led me to sort of explore a bunch of other things, which is like, how do we prepare for a world of unmetered intelligence? And critically, what is the limit to AI adoption? Because one of the incredible threads that you pull on, if you start to wonder how cheap will the models get and how good will the models get, well, what's the limit to the extent with which we adopt these models? That's philosophical, but it's also practical now. It actually will start to tell us what should companies adopt, what should companies build, and what shouldn't they. That has led me to study something that I'm going to share with you today that's going to be published in my book, The Next Renaissance, later this year. But for now, I'm going to share with you something that most of the world I haven't talked to about, which is a theory of a technological threshold and a societal threshold. A technological threshold asks the question, what can a machine do? A societal threshold asks the question, what do we want a machine to do? For most of human history, these questions didn't actually have a different answer. There was a perfect convergence. We invented and discovered things often out of necessity. We saw inventions as means to live a day longer. Tools were often overused as a means to sort of do anything. There's, the joke, if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, was true for a long time, right? Early humans used all of the tools they had to an exceptional extent. And this was true for quite some time until we started to move into this post-scarcity world. And we started to observe this world as one that we didn't need all of the tools that we had access to. In Germany and the United States, we understand this exceptionally well because we discovered nuclear power in the 50s, built a bunch of it in the 70s and 80s, and by the 90s in Germany and the United States and other parts of the world, we had made it largely illegal to build new nuclear power. And the reasoning in both of our nations was, we have enough coal, we have enough other energy, we don't need nuclear energy. We saw it as a luxury. It was a societal threshold that we actually rolled back. And if you stare at this long enough, what you come to realize is in a world where technological thresholds are now moving exceptionally fast, in a world where what a machine can do today probably pales in comparison to what a machine can do tomorrow, it occurs to us that a societal threshold, much more than a technological threshold, actually defines what the future holds. And that has then led me to ask, how and why does a societal threshold move? How and why do we decide that a machine is something, or technology is something, we should adopt? And to understand this, we went and studied a bunch of contemporary societal thresholds, and we've arrived at one of my favorites, the elevator. In 1854, Otis Elevator starts selling what he calls a people mover. Elijah Otis, the owner of Otis Elevator, starts selling what he calls a people mover to most of the United States, or at least all of the tall buildings he can find. And the people mover had this one unique improvement to what had traditionally been a rope and pulley system. It was a fail-safe, because prior to Elijah's invention, machines and people moved up and down tall buildings and mine shafts on simple rope and pulley systems. And obviously, if the rope or pulley broke, they plummeted, which was a very suboptimal outcome for anyone on the machine. And so a lot of humans didn't ride on them, only the brave. And Elijah said, what if we just created something that caught the machine if something broke, a fail-safe? And he sold a bunch of these to tall buildings quite successfully, because everyone was so excited to now have a means of moving people up and down the building. And about 6 months to a year later, people start calling up building owners to say, hey, no one's riding the machine. And actually sales start to slow. And the feedback is that everyone is still terrified. There is no trust. And so Elijah has now done something that he, of course, he may not say it, my word's not his, but he's met the technological threshold. He's built a system that is empirically safe, that does what it is meant to do, but he hasn't met the societal threshold. He hasn't convinced people they should use it. So he comes up with 3 ways he thinks he can convince people to ride in the elevator. The first is he puts a mirror in the back of every elevator to distract you when you walk in. The second is he puts music in every elevator to entertain you a little when you walk in. And the third is he puts a human in every elevator, an operator, to give you the sense of human agency and control. And this human had this incredible knock-on effect, which is that it reminded everyone someone's job was to ride up and down all day in this machine, and they had not yet died, so certainly you could also survive. And it works. It moves the societal threshold. Everyone then starts riding elevators, and of course the rest is history. Today we do so with abandon. Now, if you're willing to sort of laugh or at least giggle at the elevator societal threshold, then it should start to pull on a pretty interesting thread, which is, what is our elevator? What is our obvious societal threshold? And it turns out we have a lot. In fact, we have more societal thresholds stuck than any generation ever, probably by an order of magnitude, because technological thresholds have just moved so fast. CRISPR and GMOs are obvious ones, but there are many other technologies that we simply don't adopt very well today because we don't see them as something that we have to adopt. Now that leads me to the question that I think is most important and pertains to the discussion today, which is, what is our AI societal threshold, and how and why do AI societal thresholds move? And to answer this, we went and studied what I think is the bellwether of AI societal thresholds, the most interesting thing that we can explore that has met a technological threshold but has far from met a societal threshold: the autonomous vehicle. Now, a lot has been written about autonomous vehicles, and it would be, it's pretty incredible to even talk about it in a novel sense, but there is something incredible going on with the autonomous vehicle that I think most people are somewhat missing right now. And at least in the United States, the story is incredible. About 45,000 people will die on the US roadways this year, of which 7,000 are children. Now, we actually are about average in the nation, and there are many other countries on earth that have an even worse per capita death on the roadway. So what's incredible, though, is that this terrible problem now has an obvious solution: autonomous vehicles, which it turns out is incredibly unpopular. In fact, autonomous vehicles in the United States polls at about 25% approval. And this is, to me, the most interesting thing to study with respect to autonomous vehicles. Why is one of the most obvious solutions to such a terrible problem so deeply unpopular? What is going on that is not allowing people to adopt this exciting technology that could save so many lives, and many children's lives? Now, what I'm going to show you is research that we've done over the last few years that, again, is about to be published, that I think tells the story of how and why AI societal thresholds will move slower, at least as told by the autonomous vehicle. The first reason that the AI societal threshold and the autonomous vehicles societal threshold has moved slowly is quite simply that we love control. I had a prior going into this research. I had been sitting about 2019 on a stage with some engineers from Waymo and Zoox talking, and I think Tesla, talking about the incredible progress that autonomous vehicles were making. And when I got off stage, a woman came up to me and put her finger in my chest, sort of proverbially, and said, "You shouldn't talk about autonomous vehicles like that. When the government takes our vehicles away, they're going to start taking all of our freedoms away." And she told me that vehicles were inherently American, and that autonomous vehicles were anti-American. And she described this world where we would lose freedom. And so I had in my brain this idea that it was a freedom thing. It's not. In fact, it's far from it. To understand this, we actually did a lot of studies, but the best one we did is we went to Disneyland. I don't know how many of you have been to Disneyland recently, and if you have, thanks for your tourism. It's not far down the road for me, about 150 miles or so down the coast. And at Disneyland, there's this really incredible, now sort of famous ride called Autopia. Autopia is a cement track on which children aged about 3 through 8 drive around in gas-powered go-karts on tracks that allow them about this much wiggle room. You basically don't have to turn the wheel, and the pedal is Boolean. It's either on or off. The ride smells bad. It spews fumes, and in fact, the workers complain of headaches. It sounds bad. It's very noisy. It looks bad. It's just a cement track. There's not much foliage. And it's featured in, of all places, Tomorrowland, despite the fact that it is decidedly not futuristic. It is an embarrassment to Disney by basically any standard. And yet, when they explore shutting it down or changing it, they are met with incredible opposition, primarily from parents, but also the consultants. Because since 1954, the date of its inception, Autopia has been the most popular ride for young children at Disneyland. There is a visceral experience to getting in the car, putting your foot on the pedal, and turning the wheel. It is so hard to describe. Many of us hate our commute, but the control of the machine is unbelievably important. BMW obviously understands this, at least in the United States. They sell BMWs to us as the ultimate driving machine, despite the fact they know full well most people are simply commuting in stop-and-go traffic in their ultimate driving machine. The control is important, and appreciating this, understanding this is so important to actually understanding how and why giving up control of these machines will be hard for a lot of people, even if the control is killing us.
Wenn du Unternehmerin oder Unternehmer bist, dich für die Einführung von künstlicher Intelligenz in deinem Unternehmen interessierst und schon jetzt 200.000 € Jahresumsatz erzielst oder wachsen willst, dann habe ich jetzt etwas genau für dich. In unserem kostenfreien Live-KI-Webinar lernst du die 5-Säulen-Strategie kennen, mit der schon viele unserer Kunden KI erfolgreich und gezielt in beispielsweise Vertrieb, Marketing und Kundenservice integriert haben, statt Zeit und Geld in unklaren Experimenten zu verschwenden. Möchtest du wissen, welche Tools wirklich zu deinen Prozessen passen und wie du sofort Effizienz und Profit steigerst? Scanne den QR-Code hier und melde dich kostenlos an.
The second reason AI societal thresholds will move slowly is that technological thresholds are moving too quickly. When we started doing this study, autonomous vehicles were not very good. And at least relative to human drivers. And I actually didn't care. I was not particularly interested in how good the machine was. I was simply interested in the fact that there was a huge problem, death on the roadways, and an obvious solution, autonomous vehicles, that was very unpopular. And what I thought was interesting is that people simply didn't even care about the fact that these machines could get good. They just didn't want them. Something fascinating happened, though, in the course of studying these machines. They got really good. In fact, they got so good that they are empirically better than human drivers in almost every environment and every inclement weather condition. So, to my surprise, guess how much that moved the polls? That's right, not at all. Not at all. In fact, it appears that autonomous vehicles might be even less popular today than they were 3 years ago. Now, some of this is a political issue, and the leaders of autonomous vehicles may not be doing themselves any favors. But there is a remarkable thing going on, which is it turns out humans do not risk adjust well. 20 times more people on Earth are afraid of flying than driving, despite the fact that one of these activities is very safe and one of these activities is very dangerous. But more importantly, most people on Earth have no idea how good the alternative is, which is simply to say that in the United States, we have 4 pockets: Pittsburgh, San Francisco, Austin, and increasingly LA, where there are pretty successful autonomous vehicle projects. Outside of those cities, basically no one has ever been in one and has any idea that they're very good. And this presents an obvious problem because as autonomous vehicles get better, it will be very hard for people to actually know when and how they should adopt them. And for that matter, as AI systems get better and better at a faster and faster rate, it will be exceptionally hard for anyone to know when they should use them. I met this face-to-face, actually, at a medical conference about a month ago. I stood on stage espousing the capabilities of radiology pathology in autonomous systems. Specifically, GPT 4.5 had done exceptionally well in recent radiology pathology tests. A radiologist in the crowd of about 1,000 people during Q&A stood up, raised his hand, and said, "I'm sorry to embarrass you." That's how he started the question, by the way, and I challenge anyone to try it. It doesn't go super well, but he said, "I'm sorry to embarrass you," and then went on to tell me about how radiology pathology actually wasn't very good in these new systems, and that radiologists were still better. And he cited a study from January 2024. When he was done, I then said, "Sir, I'm sorry to embarrass you, but the study you've cited, which I actually contributed to, is now, in fact, old. GPT 4.0 was on the margin okay at radiology pathology. GPT 4.5 is empirically much better at every scan except the chest, and even that depends on the patient. Which is to say that brain scans, abdomen scans, limb scans are much better with AI computer vision systems." Now, it's not your fault that you didn't know that, because it literally just happened. And the problem now is we live in a world where these systems are getting so much better, so much quicker, it's really hard to know when we should adopt them. But the third reason is the most important. This is the one that I stare at every day, and this is the one that you'll probably think about for quite some time. I think it's going to be the one that actually determines the future of AI systems. Humans have an exceptional tolerance for human failure, and we have none for machine failure. This is the thing. This is why globally 1.3 million people can die on our roadways. That's how many people die on the roads every year around the globe. But if a Waymo swerves into the wrong lane, there is an international outcry to shut the whole thing down. And in particular in Europe, I will say, there is a unique level of protectionism these days. There is an incredible sense from the government that they must protect people from these systems, despite the fact that these systems often have a much lower failure rate than people themselves. There are a lot of reasons for this, but I think the two most important ones, and the ones that I think are going to actually determine a lot of how these systems are adopted, are one, humans have this incredible sense that mechanical failure is synonymous with systemic failure. If one machine will fail, or can fail, all machines will fail in the same way. And of course, machines have this incredible quality, which is that if we can observe them failing, we can actually stop all the other ones from failing in the same way. Humans do not possess this quality. We fail every day in the same way, collectively and individually, over and over and over. The other reason for this is that humans have no empathy for machines. And I don't actually hate this one. There is an incredible value to humans having much more empathy for each other than artificial intelligence. But there's this incredible phenomenon. We went and studied the last 50 Olympics, of which there are roughly 2 heroes from every Olympics: the gold medalist and the abject loser, it turns out. The underdog who doesn't win a medal is in many cases as celebrated as anyone else. And in fact, we've made more movies about people who tried and failed than those who tried and won. My favorite growing up was a film called Cool Runnings, a Disney film about the Jamaican bobsledders Jamaican sprinters who went to become bobsledders at the Canadian Winter Olympics in '84 and failed to win a medal after having to carry their bobsled across the ice, but came home to heroes. The last time that your washing machine tried really hard to do its job and just couldn't quite get it done, you did not go write a screenplay. And this is the thing. This is a remarkable thing. We want and we are willing to let each other try and fail because human achievement is fallible, but we do not have the same tolerance for machines, even in circumstances where they are doing far better than a human would. I don't have a ton of answers for this. I will say two things. One, there are many societal thresholds that if we don't adopt will truly hold back human progress. Some of them are novel science, some of them are infrastructure like autonomous vehicles. But also, there are many societal thresholds that we should probably never cross. There are many places that I think machines should never permeate our lives. And figuring this out is going to be one of the incredible opportunities of the next generation. The last thing I'll say is this. Today is the best day ever to be born, and I say this to everyone, but I feel a particular calling to say it to Europeans today. And I think tomorrow will be too. Now, it's true there are plenty of problems in the world, but I don't think you would ever want to be born on a day other than today or tomorrow or the next. The world is going to continue to get better. The problem is many people don't believe this. And when leaders around the world ask me, how should we better adopt AI? What are the means in which we should do it? My first answer every time is lead from a place of optimism. It is exceptionally hard for anyone, but especially young people today, to want to adopt systems that they do not believe will lead to a better world. It is not sufficient to say we're going to save a bunch of money or we're going to save you a bunch of time. It is necessary to help people believe that they are building a better future. One in which we could cure cancer and neurodegenerative disease, one in which we could solve a bunch of other novel scientific problems, one in which we could continue to drive the cost of goods and services down so far that things like exceptional education and exceptional healthcare become abundant. And what I have to remind everyone is that optimism is not naive and is in fact one of the core ingredients to effective change management and ultimately the adoption of these systems that I think will profoundly change the world. We have a newsletter called the Next Renaissance Newsletter where we update people on the expansion of human potential every 2 weeks. You're welcome to follow along at this QR code. We'll actually update on some pretty exciting events in Europe in next month's newsletter. Thank you so much for spending this time with me.
So now I'm unmuted. Perfect, Zack. Thanks so much. One question from my side, and then we open the questions for the audience. Obviously, the Waymo example is a very good example, but some people love riding in Waymos, and I'm one of them, and I know many others, but majority not. So when you say there are thresholds, it's not the same threshold for every person. So my question is, do you have research or do you have an opinion on what is the difference between the future lovers and the future, I don't know, blockers?
Well, I think when we explore societal thresholds, we do so from a place of sort of general audience. So like there are plenty of people in this world, in the United States even, that haven't adopted most technologies, right? The Amish live effectively without most modern technology quite happily. But we don't actually talk about the Amish when we explore societal thresholds. We don't talk about the Amish when we talk about the fact that car adoption hasn't covered the earth. 99.9% of people on earth have been in a car or are comfortable driving in a car, and there's a population who either live so remotely they don't need it or live with values that don't allow for it. What we're trying to study is the general population response. And in my opinion, societal thresholds tip probably about 60 to 75%, right? So there are a number of people that still actually don't operate with smartphones in society. They only want flip phones or analog sort of traditional phones, Gen 1, cell phones. It doesn't mean that smartphones haven't basically blanketed most of the population. The question of when will the population adopt we used to sort of reduce to, it was an age thing, like younger generations are more progressive, but that's actually not true. It has far more to do with the blockers to societal threshold, overcoming a sense of control in many cases, better understanding when a technological threshold has progressed, and reducing what we see as a reasonable failure rate. And so in the case of control, one of the things that Tesla is now doing, which is fascinating, is trying to convince us that the car is not actually something we should be driving at all, but something that we should be lounging in. So if you've observed the Tesla's recent robo-taxi rollout, these things don't really look like cars. They almost look like living rooms, because they want to disabuse us of the idea that this is ever something that we should be controlling and actually something that we should be enjoying. as for understanding the technological thresholds are moving, more and more people need to ride in these machines and tell their friends about it. It turns out once someone gets in an autonomous vehicle, they are 5 times more likely to say autonomous vehicles is something that we should adopt if they haven't already. And for most people, it only takes one ride. And then the failure rate becomes the most important, which is we are going to have to create a world where we decide there's a tolerable amount of failure. And what's very interesting is imagine a world where an autonomous surgical device could perform a much better surgery on you than a human in 99.9% of cases. Now, when that one failure rate happens, there is going to be a pretty big PR catastrophe, despite the fact that every day about 20% of surgeries around the world have complications. When a human does it, we're okay with it, but when a machine does it, we're not going to be. And figuring that out is just going to be super hard.
Coming back to the AI and the development of AI in the next 10 years down the road. So So I tend to think that people who want to block or who want to not use AI, compared to people to the 25% you mentioned who use it, lose so much benefits that they are pushed to use. So and this is what maybe in my humble opinion drives technology into our world. So of course, first 20-25% use it, but they have so much benefits that the others kind of are pushed to and have to use it. Isn't it the case?
Well, with respect, I think Europe is going to make the argument that that's not the case. I think Europe is actually making the argument that Europe can protect itself from the downside. At least the policymakers have made the case that adoption isn't going to be the most important decider of economic and social progress. It's going to be actual protectionism. Now, I don't actually agree, but I do think what we are going to observe is a series of experiments run around the world, where some economies say, we want to sprint towards adoption, and other economies say we actually want to create lots of safeguards. But those safeguards are part of these societal thresholds. They are, they're sort of one of the functions of societal thresholds that often account for public perception. And it's very easy to say that the world behaves rationally, and that when you see someone overperforming you economically, you will want to do what they do. But that's not actually how the world works. Quite the opposite. We often see someone who is overperforming us economically, and we say, well, why do they have those advantages? We should take those advantages away from them, or we, that's unfair. Yeah. It's actually quite uncommon for people to sort of behave perfectly rationally with respect to adoption of new systems.
Okay, taking in account all these thresholds you mentioned, in the end, what would be the picture you draw for the future of AI in, let's say, 10 years by 2035? So your former boss, Sam Altman, likes to talk about AGI and all this stuff, which is probably coming very, very soon, he says. So what is your take on this?
Well, I think you could make the argument that AGI is already here. And I think, I think it's very reasonable to say that some form of AGI is here. The problem with AGI as a term, it was always a marketing term. It was never a scientific term. So it has no actual scientific measurement. You can't prove that AGI has arrived, and you can never really prove that it hasn't. One of the two indicators of AGI that we sort of all agree on is novel scientific discoveries and deflation. Those are the two things that we think AGI should drive in sort of any outcome. The cost of goods and services should come down because it becomes easier to create goods and services, and we should start to discover a lot more. Even the problem with deflation is that policy can actually artificially inflate anything, and we're observing this right now with tariffs. So I would say it's actually quite hard to make the clear determination of AGI. That said, By 2035, we will probably likely be there, wherever there is. I think that the big change in 2035 will be this move towards a natural language operating system or a natural language world. One of the big things that I think happens over the next 10 years is we discover that our eyes and fingers are far less important to knowledge work than we have made them to be for the last 300 years, 400 years. For most of, well, certainly all of human history, if you wanted to learn something, you had to read it or hear it. And if you wanted to transmit something, you had to type it or say it. And we designed the internet specifically for our eyes and for our fingers. It was meant as a library where we input with our fingers and receive with our eyes. And so we built this very inefficient internet full of sort of aesthetically pleasing experiences designed for our eyeballs. And I think as we start to build these machines that are able to do things effectively for us, we're going to redesign the internet to actually be not a place for our eyes, but a place for our agents. And I think redesigning the internet probably around a series of trillions of TXT and XML files is probably the most likely outcome, where the internet will just be a massive database of effectively Word documents that aren't meant for us. They're meant for machines, and that the internet experiences that we browse will be very unique and sort of very special in the way that they're designed. Because most of what we do will actually be just, assigning tasks and goals to these machines. And that then gives way to this world where we realize the screen itself becomes far less important to our lives. And a world like that probably gives way to devices that we carry, the laptop and the cell phone, and probably towards a world where we're wearing them, glasses, watches, and rings. And that, to me, is sort of the beginning of the next phase of this digital world, one in which we sort of untether ourselves from these very sort of awkward, cumbersome machines that require all of our attention, right? If you're using your laptop, you must be using it, or if you're using your phone, you must be typing in it. But that's not actually probably the future of machines. It's much a more passive relationship where they're doing lots of interesting things for us all the time, and we can actually, hopefully, live a much more human life, which is my belief in how the world might turn out as a result of all of this.
Yeah, what you describe is that the device, the interface, is coming much closer to the human body. Do you also think that the interface will make it into the human body?
It already has. Let's be clear. It already has. I mean, Neuralink has successfully implanted in now, I think, 4 patients, and when I talk about this, if I talk about this to someone who hasn't heard this before, they say, oh, that's so weird. And then I tell them that the patients Neuralink is supporting are paraplegic. And they say, oh, yeah, that's really nice. And this, again, is one of these interesting societal thresholds, right? It's this idea that something is weird until we appreciate that it is serving someone in a very an important way who couldn't otherwise participate in the world. So it's already here. The question, though, is to what extent does this societal threshold move? To what extent does Neuralink sort of permeate all of our lives? And I don't have an answer to that. I don't think there's a clear answer. I think you can make a good argument that the brain-computer interface is the eventuality. I think you could also make the argument that the systems will get so smart and operate so well passively that text and voice will be able to do so much, and you don't have to implant these machines, and we will find out.
Yeah. I pick some questions from the audience. I'm on the way. Stefan, who is the managing director of the investment funds inside To Be Ahead, is here.
Hi, Zach. Hope you can hear me.
I can hear you just fine.
Okay. Very simple question, I think, but maybe. In the days before the Otis elevator, only the brave would ride it. In the early days of the roller coaster, only the brave would ride it. They would get in line, but only men with hats, would take that looping in the very early days. And then today, and so it was an individual threshold. Every individual could say, I accept that risk or not. And the risk was pretty obvious of falling out of an elevator or down with an elevator or falling out of a roller coaster. So I would argue at this time this was an individual risk threshold. Now today, you can fly Delta Airlines or Ryanair or Southwest. It's all regulated safety. They're all as safe, no difference. There's almost no chance of taking a risk unless you put a sleeping bag on a highway and sleep there. You know, it's hard to take a risk in this society. So my problem with your concept is that you're comparing individual thresholds, which were there before, to today's world where we have something like a societal threshold, which very likely, in my understanding, transites into norms that are even technical norms, like SIL norms or so, how good an aircraft is, how good an elevator is. There's simply no individual threshold today. Today it's a societal threshold by norms, isn't it? By regulation.
That's actually, there's far more, if you want to thrill seek today, you can do it. I mean, I don't need to remind you that last year, 2 years ago now, a bunch of people went down to explore the Titanic and didn't come back. There are plenty of people who want to sell you thrill-seeking experiences. There are companies that will take you base jumping without that you can go base jumping today. That's not something you could have done 30 years ago. I mean, you could have done it, but not with a company that would take you. A group of women just went to space. I mean, that risk is non-zero. There are new and exciting roller coasters all over the world. I have a friend, I should say I know someone who went to Mexico to get a very rare and probably under the table gene therapy that is not approved or regulated. Novel sciences is moving at such an incredible rate that there are more and more opportunities for people to do exceptional things. And by the way, this is also true in the human body. The men who are installing, and they're all four men, who have installed the Neuralink, these paraplegic men who have installed Neuralink in their brains, are doing so at exceptional risk. It's not to say that their lives, can get physically more complicated, but it is to say they could die. And this is very understood. When you mess with the human brain, even the slightest mistake could lead to death. So I would actually push back aggressively and say, in fact, there are more and more ways to explore the edges of our world today. In fact, there's someone today, and I don't know how far he's become popular, but there's a guy who is sailing right now from Oregon to Hawaii, having never sailed on the ocean before in his life. He's, I think, 5 days away from Hawaii. I cannot stop watching this. It's on Instagram. I hate social media, but man, do I love this story. I think his name is Sailing with Phoenix. It's a man named Oliver. He learned how to sail on YouTube and started sailing from Oregon to Hawaii by himself. It's a 25-day sail that takes you through very dangerous seas. There are plenty of places for people to thrill seek all over the world. The question is, to what extent do they, or to explore the edges of our society. The question is, to what extent will other people actually eventually do these things? And in the case of Neuralink, it takes these brave pioneers to actually explore the limits of our science in order for more people to do it, in order for more people to do it, in order for more people to do it. Which is also true for every early astronaut, it's also true for every deep sea explorer, and it's true for sort of all of the edges of the Earth. And the edges of the Earth will continue to move because brave people are testing them. The first person, by the way, to get in a Waymo on a freeway was definitely adventurous and brave. That's not something that I would have signed up for, right? Going 70 miles an hour in a car without a driver, I mean, I love Waymo today, but I don't think I wanted to be the first. And there are going to be a lot more firsts in the world because technological thresholds are just moving very fast now.
Let's take another question from this side.
Hi there, Marcel's my name. As we've talked a lot about, or you mentioned technological thresholds now again, let's maybe go back to the societal thresholds and the fact that obviously societal thresholds are made up by thresholds that each of the individuals have in common, for example. Which societal thresholds maybe did you discover with yourself in the process of working for OpenAI, creating ChatGPT, contributing so significantly to its development and also adaptation worldwide? And how did you
Can I tell
maybe
you, this is
overcome
one of
them?
the best questions I've ever been asked, and the only other person to ask me this was my mom. So thank you. My mom, who I was raised, in sort of a, I guess a bohemian hippie household. Both my parents are doctors, but my mom is a humanist, and we didn't watch a lot of TV growing up, and she liked that I worked in technology, but didn't like the idea that I was building a less human world, and would always ask me, is this going to do everything for us? And she wasn't asking she wasn't using the specific words, but what she was asking is this going to automate everything? Are we just going to, she kept talking about the WALL-E outcome. And I have all sorts of issues with WALL-E, and it has lots of problems that the WALL-E universe does. But it is an interesting question. I will tell you, I have never been more wary of screen time and screen addiction in myself and society. And I actually deleted X. I don't use LinkedIn, my team does. And I basically stopped using all social media, because I became very, very, very cognizant of the fact that my devices were not actually serving me in many cases. And I stopped playing video games cold turkey while I worked at OpenAI. And I limited most of my game time to chess and try to play chess as much as possible over the board. Now, it's not this is not to say that I've rejected technology, far from it, right? But what I've decided is actually in a world where these systems, and this was before Jonathan Haidt's anxious generation, this is long before we started really appreciating that it wasn't just COVID, it was screen time addiction that was destroying a lot of young people's brains and lives. I basically have appreciated that one of the societal thresholds that I actually am now sort of rolling back is my addiction and excitement towards the machine itself. And that, in fact, I see technology as a means to make our lives better. It should be a means to make our lives better, not worse. And we always talk about the young people and how addicted they are, and then I have to remind everyone that the average Candy Crush user is a 59-year-old woman. It's this multi-generational, indiscriminate issue. And I just now, one of my great crusades is to convince the world that the most important thing we can build isn't data centers. It's not chip fabrication, it's livable cities. It's livable, walkable communities, because we're actually probably going to build an exceptionally automated world that has economic abundance in ways that we probably cannot imagine today. We have to ensure that we create spaces that people want to live in physically. We have to ensure that we want to be with each other. That wandering the earth and exploring and spending time outside with friends and family and physical community is still of principal importance, because we know it's the thing that makes us happiest. We know this empirically. It's on everyone's deathbed. We hear this, and of course every teen around the world right now is describing a much more anxious, depressed life because they're more reclusive and isolated. It's not rocket science. We just have to make sure we build towards it. So that, to me, is the great societal threshold that I now really appreciate and have tried to be very cognizant of.
If you have any questions, just show up. I throw one question from my side. I see from my side in. You mentioned that we Europeans, we have thresholds as well, and protectionism and so on. But nowadays we are wondering what Donald Trump has just done in the Arab countries. So they have bought AI for 3.6 trillion, if I'm right, from the US and from Sam Altman and all the CEOs of the tech companies. So could you explain us what is happening there?
Geopolitically, I think the effort right now by the West is to realign and reestablish good relationships with the Western sympathetic nations, namely Saudi and UAE, to help try to establish, I think, more stability in the region, right? In a world where we sort of need to reestablish certainly what we would see is probably an importance of sort of Western sympathy. This is probably the most effective way to do it economically, which is to build a strong tie to a region that has an exceptional amount of money and a lot of a sort of depleting valuable resource, oil. And so UAE and Saudi are now saying, okay, what else should we invest in? One of them is becoming the finance hub of the area, which is obviously important, but the other is going to be, I think, becoming a chip fabrication and data center and probably renewable energy hub of the world. And that's what you're seeing. And I think what it's going to mean is the West has more interest in sort of protecting and providing security to these places, and in turn they're going to provide these like very, very important, very valuable resources and sort of scale them as fast as possible, namely data centers and probably chip fabrication facilities for the West as fast as possible.
What does this mean for Europe? So you mentioned Europe, and you have projects in Europe. What should we do as Europeans?
So I don't know what President Trump's visit to the Middle East means specifically for Europe. What I can say is this: as you know, what is increasingly clear to me is that many Europeans now are sort of feeling this increasing excitement around AI. It's becoming less of a pessimistic dread and more of a economic opportunity, which is a great start. In particular, in Italy, where I've been twice in the last sort of 6 weeks, there is this renewed understanding, I think, or new maybe, around the importance of digitizing an economy that ranks basically dead last in the world in digital adoption. And that, you know, a lot of people have just said to me, a lot of leaders in Italy, look, it's not the US's fault that we didn't adopt technology fast enough, and we want to do it now. We don't want to be left behind this time. So what I'm seeing on the ground, and actually also from business leaders, is very different than what I'm seeing from the politicians, because what I'm seeing from the politicians is still this incredible assuredness in the EU AI Act. And I just have to say, in very plain words, it's a really bad piece of policy. It is not clear, it's poorly written, and it's going to be incredibly over-restrictive in both in terms of the adoption, in terms of the development of AI, how much people actually build, but far more importantly in terms of the adoption, because my thesis now is that economies will actually be measured in the future on AI adoption, how much of the economy can, you know, self-sustain and automate as a result, and improve its safety as a result of automating a bunch of functions. And this is especially true in emerging economies, but is also going to be true in even large, you know, industrial economies like Germany's, which is, you know, I think the 5th largest in the world. And what I would stress now is an importance to actually push back on the policymakers. Which is not something that, you know, Europe has a long, proud tradition of. It's a policy first and sort of figure out the rest later block. But I think now is the time to say, listen, if we could undo GDPR, we would. It's too far gone. It's very hard to rewind policy. That GDPR had a pretty bad economic consequence. It said it would protect consumers. In fact, it probably had another effect. And we now need to start revisiting this EU AI Act as fast as possible, because what we said was going to be protectionism could in fact be far more harmful. And I will just stress that I think the best and most interesting opportunity right now, especially in Europe, if you're a leader in community or a policymaker, is to think about the small, medium business. Right? It's very easy for Europe to say, oh, the enterprises are fine. They're fat and happy, and they sort of, you know, talk about enterprises as like these actors that must be controlled. But there's a bipartisan agreement that small, medium businesses have to be helped, and they are adopting AI in Europe slower than even small, medium businesses in South America right now, and that's bad. And I think it's going to have a very bad economic outcome. And so what I would say is, remember that there are so many businesses that aren't that don't evade tax. It's like whatever the narrative is, there are a bunch of people that create jobs in local communities that are so important to local economies that are culturally and socially enriching, and they need to adopt this technology, and we have to build an ecosystem of providers, of technology and services providers that can enable them. And also we need to create policy that makes it very clear they're not going to be punished for taking a risk with this.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I really worry.
Thanks for these plain words. So we are on the same page here. We have another question from the audience.
Hi, Zack. Xiao Xiwei, co-founder, CEO of External, from US as well. So thank you for bringing us to the very unique experience, how automobiles are changing our life, we're on the edge of changing how we think. Just to go back to history, you think about the Bertha Benz, the first human actually demonstrates we don't need to take a horse, but this machine can take us from A to B. And Henry Ford talk about, hey, if we ask people what you want, probably they will ask for a faster horse, right? I feel like both are heroes, they actually demonstrated and encouraged the people used to be not in control seat necessarily, because I kind of believe the first people afford the car is not people actually riding the horse, but they are behind the carts. But now, they are willing to go out to actually control this machine and then to experience life. So I feel like there's going to be a huge convincing messaging down in the history. I just wanted to take your thoughts on how will we learn from this history and try to guide us for the future steps.
Well, I think right now, the primary issue with historical comparison is that it doesn't really work outside of a 30 or 40-year window, in part because secondhand stories are very hard for people to actually deeply resonate with. It turns out most of us only care about our lived history. And if we can't draw a comparison to our lived history, everything feels too abstract. There's a very sobering reality in the United States right now around a lived history that many Germans can remember that somehow seems not relevant anymore in the United States, and that's deeply unsettling. The reality, though, is I think we are at a place where we're going to build. My expectation is we are going to see exceptional breakthroughs in the novel sciences category, where people discover that we don't actually have to live with these terrible issues, or some of these terrible issues, and that novel sciences, in particular bio and life sciences, becomes an incredible catalyst for change in other categories, where we say, oh, maybe we don't need to live in a world with, for example, cancer. Well, we certainly then don't need to live in a world where we die in an automobile. And I think the major catalysts, major breakthroughs in novel sciences will, I think, spur a lot of other societal thresholds in other places.
One last question, Zack. So everything we predict about AI and all these breakthroughs and through AI and so on, all this is based on the fundament that we have enough energy available on Earth for all these AIs and all these technologies. What is your take on this question? So will we have enough energy, or will there be a shortage? What is if yes, what is the outcome of this?
Yeah, so I think I don't have a good answer. What is clear is that we will probably need a major breakthrough in material or particle technology to build. We can't just build a lot more solar panels. In particular, all this energy needs to be localized. What we need is to build a fundamental new energy technology, and it's probably small. It's going to probably be small reactors or eventually large fusion reactors. And the question is when. I think we also shouldn't discount the potential for a major breakthrough in architecture that reduces the size of the model and sort of compresses the model itself, so it reduces the load. I also think there's a decent possibility that we end up doing a lot of edge compute and a lot of inference runs locally, which will also reduce energy demands. But ultimately, at our current rate, we know that we are going to have a sort of chip and energy shortage, and we will need a major fundamental breakthrough in one of these categories. I will say, having worked in this industry long enough to see a bunch of scaling laws get written and rewritten and rewritten, I really think we have to assume at this point that human ingenuity is going to outperform our current understanding of the known universe.
Thanks. Thanks for spending this hour with us. Maybe for the famous last words, please repeat the name of your book, which is coming this year, because we have to order this.
Well, I'll make sure, yeah, I wish I had a pre-order link for you today. We'll send it out to you to send to everyone, but The Next Renaissance, AI and the Expansion of Human Potential is the name of the book, and we'll make sure that you have a pre-order link for everyone.
Cool. Thanks so much. Have a great day in California. Thanks, Zack.
Thank you.
Wenn dir dieses Video gefallen hat, dann lade ich dich ganz persönlich ein. Komm zum Rule Breaker Zukunftskongress im nächsten Jahr, weil da gibt es mehr davon. Dieser Rule Breaker Zukunftskongress ist kein Kongress wie jeder andere. Das ist ein Ort, an dem du die Zukunft deiner Branche verstehst, gestaltest und manchmal sogar neu denkst. Die Agenda wird wieder voll sein von Rule Breakern, Visionären, Technologen aus aller Welt, von echten Unternehmern. Hol dir jetzt dein Ticket und ich verspreche dir, das wird sich absolut lohnen. Den Link findest du in der Videobeschreibung und über den eingeblendeten QR-Code.